Well, armed with billions of dollars in savings built up during the pandemic, consumers went on a spending splurge as restrictions were lifted around the world and international borders reopened. But supply couldn't keep up with demand, and Russia's invasion of Ukraine helped to nudge the inflation genie out of the bottle. SBS finance editor Ricardo Goncalves looks back at the year in finance and explores what's next with his top 5 charts of 2022.
As the year commenced, experts were discussing whether inflationary pressures which had started to build were temporary or more permanent as the global economy reopened following years of restrictions. What they didn't count on, though, was Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It sent food prices through the roof, namely wheat, which hit a record high. Together, Russia and Ukraine supply about a quarter of the world's wheat. The other impact was on energy. Oil prices surged, exacerbated by OPEC's move to restrict supply. Here, it followed through to higher petrol prices, which hit a record in April. And while they've both eased from their peaks as global growth stalls, what persists is an energy crisis, particularly in Europe, which imports 90% of the gas it consumes, with Russia providing 45% of those imports.
Now, Europe has managed to secure sufficient imports for LNG for the coming winter. However, a medium-term solution to move away from Russian energy dependency still remains unsolved. So we expect some sort of volatility to continue in that space.
The combination of rising food, energy and petrol prices contributed to booming inflation around the world. Here, it surged to the highest since 1990, and it hit consumers pretty hard because wages growth has failed to keep up with it, even with unemployment at a near 50-year low. Now, it'll take some time for that gap to narrow, but experts say it will happen.
But as we go through next year, we're going to see more evidence that inflationary pressures will start to abate. We're already seeing that, for example, in the US. We're seeing supply imbalances start to return to normal. We're seeing lower costs for transport. Demand is starting to slow. All of those things will lead to a sharp fall in inflation over the next 12 months. At the same time, that the still strong jobs market will push wages growth up a little bit higher.
That should be good news for borrowers who've had to bear the brunt of the Reserve Bank's strategy of combating rising consumer prices by lifting official interest rates from an emergency rate of 0.1% in May to 3.1% in December. That's the fastest rate of interest rate rises in decades. As banks pass those rates on to their customers, mortgage repayments on variable rates soared, and it lowered the amount home buyers could borrow by as much as 27% compared with the beginning of the year. That in turn saw property prices pull back from record levels.
And there's probably more pain to come, unfortunately, because we're yet to see the impact of the mortgage rate cliff. And that will occur when those people who fortunately locked in at 2% or so mortgage rates a year or two ago are now going to find when they roll over, when their term expires, they'll roll over to something like 5 or 6%. And that unfortunately may result in a bit of forced selling and more downwards pressure on property prices.
There was also downward pressure on the Australian dollar. It traded as high as 75 US cents earlier in the year and as low as 62. That is a 22% range, more than the average over the past 30 years. While the world flocked to the US dollar as interest rates there rose, China's COVID restrictions for much of the year slowed its economy, reducing demand for commodities and iron ore, which are linked to the Australian dollar.
But the Aussie has rebounded from a low of 62 to 67. Going forward, we think that the Aussie dollar will appreciate. Dollar dominance theme has reduced. Global risks are waning, and the best part, news of China reopening will be supportive. So domestically, momentum is solid. We've got a strong labour market, strong consumption levels. We expect the Aussie dollar to appreciate to 70 next year.
That, however, may be little comfort for travellers wanting to go overseas in the new year, with international airfares at 15-year highs.